The morning of October 25, 1854, broke cold and grey over the hills surrounding the small port of Balaclava. For months, British, French and Ottoman forces had laid siege to the Russian naval base of Sevastopol. Balaclava was the British lifeline, the harbour where all their supplies, their food, their ammunition, and their reinforcements came ashore. For the Russians, capturing this port meant strangling the British army and breaking the siege, and on this chilly autumn morning they decided to strike. Under the command of General Leprondi, a formidable Russian force of around 25,000 men and 78 guns descended into the valley. Their first objective was a series of small, hastily constructed earthen forts, called redoubts, which were manned by Ottoman Turkish troops. The British commander, Lord Raglan, watched from his headquarters high on the Sapoon Heights, a superb vantage point that gave him a panoramic view of the entire battlefield. But a view is not the same as control. The Russian cannons opened fire, and a wave of infantry advanced. The Ottoman soldiers in the first three redoubts fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, the redoubts fell. The surviving defenders streamed back towards the British lines, their retreat covered by the disciplined volleys of the 93rd Highland Regiment. As the Russian cavalry advanced, confident of a breakthrough, they were met by this single line of Scottish infantry. Their commander, Sir Colin Campbell, famously told his men, "There is no retreat from here. You must die where you stand." The Highlanders stood firm, firing two volleys that shattered the Russian cavalry charge. This heroic stand would forever be remembered as the Thin Red Line. Meanwhile, another drama was unfolding nearby. The Russian cavalry, having been repulsed by the Highlanders, now faced the British Heavy Brigade under General James Scarlett. Though outnumbered, Scarlett saw his chance. He ordered a charge, and his force of around 800 dragoons slammed into the side of the much larger Russian cavalry formation. What followed was a brutal, close-quarters melee of slashing sabres and rearing horses. Incredibly, after several minutes of chaotic fighting, the sheer momentum and ferocity of the British charge broke the Russian will. The larger force wavered, then turned, and fled. It was a stunning victory, achieved against all odds, but it was soon to be overshadowed by what came next. From his high vantage point, Lord Raglan could see the Russians beginning to remove the captured British cannons from the redoubts they had taken earlier. This was a deep dishonor, a trophy of war the British could not afford to lose. Raglan, frustrated and wanting to press the advantage gained by the Heavy Brigade, dictated a vaguely worded order to his cavalry commander, the Earl of Lucan. The order read, "Lord Raglan wishes the cavalry to advance rapidly to the front and try to prevent the enemy carrying away the guns." But from Lucan's position in the valley, he couldn't see the captured redoubts Raglan was referring to. All he could see was a formidable Russian artillery battery at the far end of the North Valley, nearly a mile and a half away, with Russian guns and riflemen on the heights on either side. He questioned the order, but the aide-de-camp who delivered it, Captain Nolan, an impetuous and arrogant cavalryman, gestured vaguely down the valley. "There, my lord, is your enemy. There are your guns," he reportedly said. Lucan, feeling he had no choice but to obey a direct command, turned to the Earl of Cardigan, commander of the Light Brigade. Cardigan, a man known for his immense wealth and fiery temper, was Lucan's brother-in-law, and the two men despised each other. He listened to the order in disbelief. To charge down a valley lined with enemy cannons was suicide. "I know it," Lucan replied, "but Lord Raglan will have it. We have no choice but to obey." Cardigan saluted, turned to his men, and gave the command to advance, and so began the charge of the Light Brigade. 673 men on horseback, a glorious sight in their brilliant uniforms, trotted forward. Captain Nolan was among the first to be killed, struck by a shell fragment as he rode out ahead, perhaps realizing the terrible mistake and trying to alter the brigade's course. But it was too late. The trot became a canter, and then a full gallop, straight into the mouth of hell. Cannons roared from the front, from the left, and from the right. Shells exploded, tearing great gaps in the charging lines. Men and horses fell, tumbling in a horrific tangle of death and confusion. The survivors closed ranks and galloped on, their sabres drawn, their faces set, heading directly for the Russian guns at the end of the valley. They were riding into a wall of fire, a storm of iron and lead. The poet, Lord Alfred Tennyson, would later write, "Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, Cannon in front of them volleyed and thundered. Miraculously, a fraction of the brigade reached the Russian battery. They crashed into the gun crews, slashing and cutting with a desperate fury, driving the gunners from their cannons. They had done the impossible. They had taken the guns, but they were a tiny, isolated group, deep behind enemy lines, with Russian cavalry regrouping to surround them. The fight was short and brutal. There was no way to hold the position. The order was given to retreat. The ride back was, if possible, even more horrifying than the charge. The Russian gunners, on the heights, now unimpeded, poured a relentless fire into the scattered, retreating horsemen. Men looked for their comrades, only to see them vanish in a puff of smoke. Riderless horses, panicked and wounded, galloped alongside the survivors. It was a harrowing, agonizing journey back to the British lines. Of the 673 men who charged down that valley, only 195 returned with their horses. The Light Brigade, one of the finest cavalry units in the British Army, had been effectively destroyed in 20 minutes. As the shattered remnants reformed, one officer was heard to mutter, "It is a mad-brained trick, but it is very magnificent." A French general observing the charge, Pierre Bosquet, made the most famous comment of the day. "It is magnificent, but it is not war, it is madness." The Battle of Balaklava ended in a stalemate. The Russians failed to capture the port, but they held the ground and the captured cannons that had prompted the fatal charge. The day was a confusing mix of tactical blunders and incredible heroism. The stand of the Thin Red Line, the victory of the Heavy Brigade, and the tragic glorious charge of the Light Brigade became legendary tales, emblems of the courage and discipline of the ordinary soldier and of the fatal incompetence of their commanders. It was a day of blood and folly, a microcosm of the entire Crimean War, immortalized not for its strategic importance, but for the sheer human drama that unfolded on that cold October day. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this glimpse into history, please consider subscribing for more stories from the past.